Today, let's talk about the private airplane system for the Chinese government's top leaders. So how did I come up with the idea to talk about this topic? Recently, Xi Jinping went to San Francisco to attend the APEC summit. When he met with President Biden, he arrived in a Chinese-made car. Many media outlets picked up on this detail. When they ended the meeting and came outside, Xi Jinping specifically introduced it to Biden, and then Biden even popped his head inside to take a look. But my interest at that time was not in the car itself. I immediately thought that there may have been a significant change in the transportation mechanism for the government leaders in China. In the past, when the Chinese government's top leaders went on official visits, they would use a single dedicated plane. But if you want to transport an entire convoy, one plane is simply not enough. It must be transported by specialized cargo aircraft. So a few days ago, I confirmed with my friends in the domestic aviation industry, and sure enough, they told me that besides the special aircraft for Xi Jinping's visit to San Francisco, there was also a Boeing 747 cargo plane. In my opinion, this is truly an important signal and significant change. In terms of aircraft, the scale of the visit of the President of the United States is quite grand because of Air Force One. Two identical Air Force One planes take off simultaneously to confuse potential terrorists who may try to target the President of the United States. Several other aircraft also take off together alongside Air Force One. There is a communications plane specifically designed to ensure that the President of the United States can maintain smooth communication with military and administrative agencies around the world. At the same time, several Lockheed C-130 Hercules transport planes are also flown alongside the U.S. President's aircraft. This way, when the President of the United States travels to various parts of the world, he can have his own presidential motorcade. In the past, no country's president's state visits could compare to the grandeur of the President of the United States, and no country even tried to either. However, through Xi Jinping's recent visit, it can be observed that China is gradually trying to reach parity with the United States by introducing its own cargo plane. Perhaps in the future, China may also have its own communication aircraft and more transport aircraft integrated into the head of state special aircraft fleet. Let me talk a bit about China's government leaders' special aircraft system. This system used to be quite mysterious. Not many people knew too much about it. It can be roughly divided into 4 parts. Let's talk about each part separately. The first component is the 34th Division of the Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force. Its predecessor was called the Independent 8th Regiment of the Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force, which was established in 1949. In May of 1956, China already had its own dedicated aircraft for top leaders. Zhou Enlai would often travel to various parts of the country to conduct inspections, including with Zhu Dei and Liu Shaoqi. They would travel on a special aircraft provided by the Chinese government, which was operated by the 34th Division. So, Chairman Mao suddenly had the idea of flying on a private plane. He was going from Beijing to Guangzhou at that time, and the 34th Division was instructed to remodel an aircraft for his personal use. Since Chairman Mao couldn't sleep on a soft bed, it was necessary to temporarily modify the aircraft for him and install wooden bunk beds inside.
This Ilyushin Il-14 aircraft is very reliable. This aircraft has virtually become the exclusive means of transportation for the chairman. So the China Aviation Museum also refers to it as Chairman Mao's private aircraft. What I see in front of me are just ordinary chairs and desks. This airplane is like a humble little home, not even remotely luxurious.
So on this day, in May 1956, Chairman Mao sat on China's own private plane for the first time. Mao Zedong took more than 40 flights during the 2-year period from 1956 to 1958, totaling approximately 156 hours. But the Chinese Communist Party Central Committee later issued a document stating that Chairman Mao, out of concern for his safety, was not allowed to travel by plane anymore, saying, "It's too dangerous. He can no longer take flights." Therefore, Chairman Mao's subsequent travels were mostly done by a special train. So the main aircraft for the Chinese government's top leaders was primarily used by Zhou Enlai. Here, let me share an interesting historical fact with everyone. Now, during those times, the Chinese government had certain regulations and policies regarding the visits of foreigners to China. Everyone knows that during Nixon's visit to China in 1971, China made a request to the United States by saying, Once the US plane arrives in China, it cannot fly anymore. You have to use our own planes while in China. Today, it seems ridiculous to see this sort of demand being made, but at that time, China considered it as a matter of national sovereignty. So later, Nixon, together with Zhou Enlai, flew from Beijing to Shanghai on a Chinese Ilyushin 18 aircraft. Only then did China feel that it was treated equally and fairly. Don't underestimate China at that time, even though it was poor. The airplanes China bought were the most advanced in the world, including the Ilyushin 18. Later, China also began buying Western airplanes. Everyone knows that China had a good buddy, Pakistan, at that time. China had purchased 3 Trident aircraft through Pakistan. These were all under the jurisdiction of the 34th Division. There was one specifically for Chairman Mao, then one for Lin Biao, and another one for members of the State Council. Although Mao's plane was mainly used by his 4th wife, Jiang Qing, because Mao no longer flew. Later, after Lin Biao crashed in a plane accident in Inner Mongolia, the 34th Division was subjected to purges and rectification. The central government deemed the pilots who flew planes for the top government officials in the 34th Division to be untrustworthy, so most of them were investigated. As a result, the designations of the 34th Division were later revoked until later, in the 1980s, when it was re-established. The 34th Division is quite impressive now. There are 3 or 4 Boeing 737 aircraft, 3 or 4 Airbus A319 aircraft, and that famous Canadair business jet. So how is the 34th Division used by national leaders? It has some regulations. Firstly, only officials at the national level are allowed to use it. Most deputy national level officials do not have the authority to use the 34th Division's special aircraft system. There is one exception here. The Panchen Lama can use the special aircraft of the 34th Division for travel. In fact, the Chinese Communist Party has always treated the Panchen Lama, the Dalai Lama, and other religious leaders in Tibet exceptionally well. In 1953, the Dalai Lama had to travel from Tibet to Beijing to meet Mao Zedong, so the 34th Division sent 8 planes to pick them up. However, in recent years, there have been some restrictions on the use of the 34th Division by national-level officials. Slowly but surely, only the officials in the major military districts in Beijing are being permitted to use it. For example, the Minister of National Defense and other leaders of the Military Commission can use the aircraft of the 34th Division for their travels, although the State Council and the National People's Congress rarely use it. There is one situation where it is allowed. If you are traveling to a military airport, you can apply to use the special aircraft of the 34th Division. However, the destination must solely contain military airports. No other civilian airports can be in the same city. Other than that, all the big shots in the Chinese government can also use their service. For example, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China and the President can all use the 34th Division. What privileges do these aircraft of the 34th Division have when they are airborne? First, there are no restrictions on the flight route. Everyone knows that the air routes in China are not straight paths, but rather they follow designated air corridors. But after an aircraft of the 34th Division takes flight, it basically flies according to the shortest distance between points A and B. Another important point is that they operate close to Beijing. The home port of the 34th Division is at the Beijing Shijiao Airport. So, traveling with them is very convenient for Chinese leaders. One more thing. This way of traveling is highly confidential. Compared to civil aviation, it actually doesn't attract much attention. This includes after Li Keqiang passed away. His body was transported from Shanghai to Beijing. Everyone can take a look at the designation number. It belongs to the 34th Division. Although it is technically under the management of the Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force, all the aircraft it provides for leadership travel services are civilian aircraft. So its registration number is actually the registration number of a civil aircraft, but it has chosen a special series of identification numbers. They all start with B406. For example, B4060, B461, B462. You can search for pictures of aircraft in this number range online, because this information is publicly available. Lastly, the level of security for the aircraft of the 34th Division is higher compared to the special aircraft system of China Civil Aviation. Because they are all military personnel, their professional competence level is also noticeably higher than that of civilian pilots. So in reality, those party and state leaders in China are quite willing to take flights on the 34th Division's aircraft. But in recent years, the 34th Division has been usually providing services for Xi Jinping alone. I heard that other members of the Standing Committee are also becoming less willing to use the planes of the 34th Division for their own travel. The second piece of the puzzle is Air China. Air China is the only Chinese airline with the privilege of displaying the national flag, and is obligated to provide specialized air travel services for the Chinese government's top officials during their overseas visits alongside its regular civilian flights. So, who exactly does it provide these services for? Just the big four in China, pretty much. The president, the premier of the State Council, the chairman of the National People's Congress, and the chairman of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. When needed, Air China will select the best performing aircraft from its 747 fleet and transport it to its hangar in Beijing. When it arrives there, the first thing they do is conduct a regular inspection. Then perform any major maintenance needed and check everything to ensure that the aircraft is in its optimal flying condition. Secondly, the entire cabin layout will be renovated and all the seats will be removed. After taking everything apart, it would then be reassembled to match the appearance of a presidential jet. Basically, it follows the layout of the United States Air Force One. Inside there is a bedroom, an office, a reception room, etc. So why don't the Chinese government's top leaders have their own private planes? Do they really have to use the passenger planes from Air China? There's actually an interesting story behind this. In 2001, Jiang Zemin ordered a Boeing 767 from the United States. This 767 was originally planned to be stationed with the 34th Division for his regular use within the country. The 767 was a lot more comfortable than the planes of the 34th Division at the time. So they spent $120 million to buy a Boeing aircraft. He sent the plane to a modification facility near San Antonio Airport in the United States. The 2-month renovation period cost a total of $10 million, which was considered quite expensive. The renovation was done according to the layout of the Air Force One. Then, the aircraft was delivered to the Chinese side in August 2001. After they transported the aircraft back to the country, they began conducting test flights. During the test flight, however, it was said that a constant buzzing sound was discovered inside the aircraft. The Chinese military personnel began to suspect something was up. They then began inspections on the plane and they discovered something serious. 27 eavesdropping devices were found on this plane. Even the toilet had a bug put in it. China was pissed when they saw that the US was installing listening devices, not to mention in the bathroom. Who installed the bugs then? That is quite obvious. It was definitely the CIA. Because this San Antonio airport is a third-party organization and a commercial entity, it can be said that it did not have any ulterior motives. However, at that time, both China and the United States needed to urgently improve bilateral relations, so China did not make a big fuss about this matter to the US side. Of course, the United States also remained silent. But after this incident was exposed, the business of modifying passenger planes at that San Antonio airport in the United States basically couldn't be done anymore. Because if you think about it, after you secretly install a bug in China's presidential plane, who would dare to renovate anything at your place? So, as a result, the Chinese government is not willing to order another plane from the United States. They eventually just started using regular Boeing planes. The ones ordered by Chinese civil aviation can be used for civilian flights and then temporarily modified. When promoting visits domestically, though, China claims that its president is very frugal and does not have a dedicated Air Force One. Instead, he uses regular passenger planes, etc. But the real reason is that, as I mentioned earlier, he is unable to order a better aircraft from the United States. The third part of this system is Beijing Airlines. Beijing Airlines is a subsidiary of Air China and was established in 2011. It only has a total of 3 Boeing 737 aircraft. So, who exactly is it that Beijing Airlines provides services for? It is for those leaders at the deputy national level, or above. Since they are not qualified to use the 34th Division, nor qualified to take planes from Air China, they all go through Beijing Airlines. An interesting fact is that Beijing Airlines publishes its own flight routes, but these routes are not served by the 3 Boeing 737 aircraft it possesses. Every trip that gets publicized is provided by Air China, from the aircraft to the crew. In reality, the true purpose of Beijing Airlines is to maintain those 3 Boeing 737 aircraft to provide so-called private jet services for Chinese government leaders. But on the surface, they want it to look like Beijing Airlines is nothing more than a typical regional airline company. So, do you see where this is going? They don't want ordinary people to know about this privilege because it would be detrimental to the image of the government. That's the third part. Now, the fourth part is the company Deerjet, which is a subsidiary of Hainan Airlines. They specialize in the domestic business jet market. It was established relatively recently in 1995, and its original purpose was actually to provide services for government officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and some state council members during their travels. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs often has frequent visits, and the scale of the delegation is usually large. For example, there could be dozens of people traveling together on one trip. In that case, if they each purchase individual flight tickets, the cost can be quite expensive. If you were to charter a private jet, the price may actually be cheaper. This idea is what led to the establishment of this company. So, who can use Deerjet? It can be used by officials at or above the bureau level in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. For example, Qin Gang is the ambassador to the United States and holds the rank of deputy minister, so he has permission. So, who uses Deerjet the most these days? Everyone can take a look at the current Foreign Minister Wang Yi's travels. Almost all of them are on Deerjet's official aircraft. Also, the cost is not cheap at all. It's several million Chinese yuan for each trip. Deerjet uses only about 10 aircraft exclusively for the Chinese government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and other government officials. However, the number of aircraft under its management is much larger. Currently, there are over 100 aircraft in total, because in China, many top billionaires own private jets, such as the Gulfstream G550 and Gulfstream G650. This includes the CEO of Xiaomi, as well as Wang Jianlin and Jack Ma. A lot of them entrust their private jets to Deerjet for operation and management. Since Deerjet serves both the government sector and the capital sector, it is highly susceptible to collusion between officials and businessmen. In other words, even if you lack the necessary government-related qualifications, you can pay under the table and gain access to these services. Here lies the root of corruption. In other words, whoever can get a hold of all the flight and cabin records from Deerjet would definitely be able to see the most significant evidence of collusion between Chinese officials and businessmen. He claimed at that time that Wang Qishan, a high-ranking Communist Party official, had bought a new airplane under Deerjet. So which airplane was it? None other than the Boeing 787.
Wow, look at this. This is a flying palace, guys. Unbelievable. The only private Dreamliner in the world.
Welcome. This is our main lounge here, and we can have up to 16 passengers here to dining or enjoying themselves here.
Then Deerjet specifically provided flight services to the rest of his family and friends. There were some noteworthy passengers, including Fan Bingbing and Shu Qing, both of whom are famous actresses in China. When these people were sky high, it's said they were also engaging in some promiscuous behavior.
So at that time, it was discovered that Secretary Wang Qishan had multiple sex tapes. Secretary Wang Qishan was actually approached by Fan Bingbing. I'm sorry, Fan Bingbing. I'm really sorry, Miss Fan. Shu Qing was also accompanied by 3 people, and one of them was Wang Qishan.
After being exposed, this event has had a significant impact on the image of China's officials. Xinhua News Agency, a major government-run news outlet, had specifically written an article to try and debunk the rumors, stating that Guo Wengui was talking nonsense. Okay guys, it's taken me what feels like forever to finish explaining the ins and outs of the Chinese government's personal aircraft system. Now, I will briefly share my own perspective. First of all, I think the system of providing dedicated planes for the Chinese government leaders is too large, with too many personnel. Just think about it. The 34th Division has around 10 aircraft. Beijing Airlines has 3 Boeing 737s, and Deerjet has around 10 business jets. Air China also has about 20 to 30 aircraft. Is it really necessary for you to provide more than 20 private jets for the government's top leaders? Everyone knows that even in Western societies, apart from the United States, most countries do not have this kind of system. Some do, for example, Japan and France, but they serve a small selection of individuals. For example, in Japan, it is exclusively for the use of the Prime Minister and the Emperor. What kind of aircraft does the German Chancellor use for official visits? They use the refueling aircraft from their own military fleet, the Airbus A330, and modify it. But everyone can take a look at China. I estimate that there are several hundred officials at the national level or above. Is it necessary to provide dedicated aircraft to serve such a large group? Personally, I believe that this current necessity is not driven by convenience, but rather by a sense of privilege.
The party put forward the fundamental purpose of wholeheartedly serving the people and wrote it into the party constitution, emphasizing the Communist Party as a team that is completely for the liberation of the people, working thoroughly for the interests of the people, as well as demanding party cadres sit firmly on the side of the common people, forming a lively and vivid situation where it's as if all officials are merely humble servants of the public.
I also think there are various forms of corruption stemming from Deerjet. On one hand, it provides the government with so-called charter services. On the other hand, a business jet can also be rented. They also provide aircraft management services for wealthy individuals. This has led to a platform of political business collusion. There is a large group of people who are clearly not at the level of being provided with chartered flights or official aircraft by the government. However, due to the existence of companies like Deerjet, many people try to validate themselves by using their wealth and having their companies foot the bill, which then allows them to travel on these private jets. Finally, I would like to make an important claim. The actual reason behind all of this lies in the lack of openness and transparency in the Chinese system. Just think about it. If it was a normal society with the media supervising everyone, the government use of a private jet would have a set of common standards. If that were the case, would these people dare to these sorts of things? I doubt it. But do you know how many people in China are aware of the existence of such a massive specialized system within the entire government structure that provides services for them? On paper, when the Chinese government's top leaders go on official visits, they do not even have a dedicated official plane. Instead, they use modified commercial aircraft. This gives people a simple and frugal impression. So, if we really want to bring about change in this system, we must have a fully transparent news and supervision system. This is also the true purpose behind my decision to produce today's episode. If we disclose this information to let more people know, they will understand how far away those political goals the Communist Party claims to have really are. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you, everyone.
The party put forward the fundamental purpose of wholeheartedly serving the people and wrote it into the party constitution.
So at that time, it was discovered that Secretary Wang Qishan had multiple sex tapes. Secretary Wang Qishan was actually approached by Fan Bingbing. I'm sorry, Fan Bingbing. I'm really sorry, Miss Fan. Zhu Qing was also accompanied by 3 people, and one of them was Wang Qishan.